Humans, well, we got ourselves a bit of a mess, don't we? The NBA has brought to the WNBA has surfaced a conflict that's actually been going on for quite a long time now, and we've seen it in different forms and in different sports over the years. But I think it's becoming more frequent, and I think we're probably moving toward a more acute conflict where the conversation is going to be laid out on the table. So what we have is a young white human, a female, who has gathered a lot of attention, in part because of her talent, and she is objectively talented. Her numbers, make her one of the best players in women's basketball. So part of it is her skill. A big part of this, which is never mentioned in any of these discussions, it's rarely mentioned in these discussions, is the sociological reality that we are dealing with a country of over 360 million people, that at least 60 to 70% of them are white. Okay? The latest numbers are roughly that 13% of the United States population is black. So those numbers matter, okay? And as someone who has made a living for many decades working with brands, I can tell you that when any of the brands that I've worked with, and many of them are very large global brands, whenever we are choosing to advertise to any given population, well-educated, affluent men between the ages of 45 and 60, guess what kind of people we're going to show in those print ads and television commercials, or if we're going to do a radio commercial, what kind of voice we would cast for it? We are going to show that audience that we are selling to someone who looks like them. This is a fundamental principle in branding. It has been practiced for, over a century. We know that in human psychology, that if you want to sell these goods to this group of people, then show people that look like them in the advertisement. If you want to sell FUBU to young black people, then show young black people in the FUBU ads. This is not complicated. It immediately establishes some relevance, and at a glance I can say, oh, that's someone that looks like me wearing something that I might want. It immediately gives you this. And you go, well, that's probably racism, right? That's conditioned. No. We know from biology that if you had 100 horses here, 100 white horses here, and 100 black horses here, and you put a black horse in the middle, right? 100 white horses, 100 black horses, let's say they're separated by 100 yards, okay? And you put a black horse on the 50-yard line, square in the middle of them. Which group of horses is the black horse most likely to go toward? Yeah, it's most likely to move toward the herd, and the horses aren't racist. It is simply that organisms, creatures, generally like to sort themselves out in ways that make them feel safer. And the way that something looks, if it looks like me, it feels like a safer thing to do. Okay? My lens might be fogging up. Anyway, so white people like to see white people doing things. Black people like to see black people doing things. Okay? And they would prefer to see other black people doing the thing that they all love to do. Now, that's at the fundamental layer of our creatureness, of our animal nature, that we use our eyes, which about 80% of all the sensory information that we bring in, our ears, our sense of hearing, our sense of sight, our sense of taste, our sense of smell, of all of those senses, about 80% of the data that we work with, and it should make sense, is based on what we see. So we are very visually driven creatures. So you have a young, talented white girl who is playing a very popular sport in a country that is primarily populated by white people, and they like to see her succeed. Fine. Yeah? They also like to see black people succeed in sports. And more broadly, I think there's a strong argument that white people want to see black people succeed. Would white people prefer to see black people succeed or to continue to struggle? Now, there are some among you who think that white people would like to see black people struggle. I don't at all, because struggle means what comes out of struggle? Poverty comes out of struggle, crime comes out of struggle, dissent comes out of struggle, pain comes out of struggle, strife comes out of struggle. Do we see these things manifesting themselves in our culture? Is that something that we like? Is that something that you think white people like to see? That we like to see black people struggling because it makes us feel better? I'm sure there are some percentage of people who feel that way, but I think the vast majority of people like to see other people doing okay, because the ones who aren't doing okay tend to be more of a threat than the ones who are doing okay across the board. Okay? So we have a white girl in a sport that has typically been dominated by black women, and with a reputation broadly, and this is another thing that we don't want to discuss, that broadly the reputation is that blacks are superior to whites in athletics. And here we have a girl who was threatening that narrative. And black people don't like to have that threatened. I think that part of the deeper reality of what we're contending with is a level of threat that black athletes in particular are feeling about one of their spheres of excellence. Black people have consistently succeeded and in growing level of success over the decades in entertainment, sports and music and theater and movies and things like that. That's where the concentration of black excellence is, those spheres. A part of the reason why they are concentrated there is, in fact, there may be some cultural features that encourage excellence in those realms. We like to see people who look like us doing things that are excellent. And white people like seeing black people do things that are excellent too. We love to see you excel in sports. We love to see you excel in music. I personally love to see black people excel in everything. I want to see. I've worked with some of the best black people in entertainment globally, in business, and I love it. I love seeing them bring what they bring to the table. I love it. But I think that the concentration of pride within the black community, it probably does concentrate around, entertainment, sports, and music. And there were, because of the history of the country and the opportunities that were and were not available to black people, that there were lower barriers of entry into these industries, into sports. It didn't take a lot of equipment. If you had Jackie Robinson only needed to have a ball and a bat of some sort in order to grow up practicing his game on the sandlot. And that's what gave him entree into baseball. All you needed to do was to have a really good voice to sing, and you could be competitive in the music industry if you kind of worked your way through the system. Okay? So these were opportunities, low barrier to entry opportunities, where black people were able to, by virtue of their gifts, of their native talent, and a culture that really took great pride in excelling in those things and encouraged people to do that and held people accountable and would roast you. I want you to remember that the bar is extremely, extremely high for things that black people invest themselves in. Remember what happens at at Showtime at the Apollo that if you're a singer or a comedian or a musician of some sort who comes out onto the stage and you've got your, I don't know, 2 minutes to do your thing. If you don't do your thing, they will literally drag you off the stage with a hook and boo you for not being excellent. So black people take a lot of pride in excellence. All right? And here comes this young white girl into their house, something that they consider their house. This sport, women's basketball is their sport. That's the way they have a sense of ownership of it. And they are threatened by, this dominant culture, this 67%, bringing someone in and sticking their hand into their cookie jar. No, I want to protect my cookies. This is our cookie. These are our cookies. And we want to protect them. So that's one of the fundamental things that is going on. And I think it's interesting to see, across sport that we're seeing a lot of this. And I'm really here for it. And I'll tell you exactly why I think this is an excellent thing that we're having this conflict and discussion about blacks and whites in sports. Okay? So in other sports, let's look at track and field. Track and field has a long, long history, particularly in the speed events, the 100 meters, 200 meters, the relays. Blacks have dominated those events for decades, and they are a shining jewel in the crown of American athletics. Globally, we take great pride in American performance, particularly in the way that black athletes have represented the United States at the highest levels of competition. We take great pride in that. Okay. But in the women's sprint events, we've had a young woman, Abby Steiner, who has come up, and Abby Steiner is like the Caitlyn Clark of women's sprinting. She's recovering this year from a bone spur, as I understand. So, but her numbers are pretty good. She's quite competitive, and there's a similar dynamic. I remember her first race back this year. I think she won her first two races, and I'm recalling a race in the Bahamas where she again won to a bit of surprise, right? Again, you don't expect a young white girl to be beating a field of black women in these races, especially if she's coming off, an injury like surgery, and yet here she is, and she comes and wins the race. And after she crossed the finish line, it's kind of typical among sprinters to kind of give each other some love and put your arm around and congratulate and all that. And Abby really got kind of a cold shoulder. There eventually was a young woman who came up to her, but there's not there's not a lot of open arm welcome white girl into our sport and break our records and take our places on the track. No, this is very competitive, and you don't if you want to take down the king, you better not miss, right? So what these white athletes are taking shots at the king. And I think it produces, some discomfort with the kings and queens of the sport. I don't want you to take my crown. So that is Abby Steiner. There are some other sprinters. Matthew Bowling is a young white sprinter. I don't think he's going to kind of steal any major shine, but he's raising eyebrows. That's a fast white boy. Just like, Caitlyn Clark is raising eyebrows. Damn, that girl can ball. And just like Abby Steiner. Look at this race where she comes from behind. I mean, how can you not be impressed with that just visually? That's kind of, it's kind of stunning, that level of speed and that kind of performance. In boxing, for so many years, I've been watching boxing and been a boxing fan for decades. And I can remember when boxing was, almost exclusively a black sport. We certainly had some Latino boxers in there, but it was particularly in the heavyweight divisions. It was almost always dominated for decades by black athletes until Some white heavyweights came in, and I think that over the last probably 20 or 30 years, at least for half of that period, white heavyweights have been at the top of the game. I'm thinking about the Klitschko brothers. I'm thinking about also. It was really apparent to me when Deontay Wilder was fighting against Tyson Fury, that it really, at least in the YouTube comments that I was reading, and it was entertaining. In the comments that I was reading, it was very much a black versus white thing. I mean, it was this kind of archetypal clash of the titans. Who's the better, blacks or whites? Who's the more dominant? I mean, and this is kind of a showcase sport, right? To kind of a mano a mano, the essential raw competition of a man fighting another man till the other man can't fight anymore. It doesn't get any more raw and primal than that. And so through this primal lens, who is the king of the jungle? The black Deontay Wilder, chiseled, muscled, coming in all buffed out, and the whole splendor of the walk-in and all that, and versus Tyson Fury, this kind of tall, schlubby, okay, but deceptively brilliant boxer. For a man his size who can move the way he moves. And it does the fakes. He moves like a much smaller man, and he has high levels of skill. Compared to Deontay, who was, truth be known to anyone who watches boxing, Deontay's not a boxer. Never has been a boxer. Deontay started, I think, boxing when he was started in the sport when he was 21 years old. So he never came up through the ranks of amateur and learning and honing his craft and going through the Golden Gloves and all that, where you really have to learn technique and style, and you just develop those skills over a long time, so that by the time you make it through the farm system and are eligible to be a pro, your skill set is typically well developed, and we've seen that across all the weight divisions for a long time. But Deontay didn't do that. He came in at 21, and he had an amazing right hand. He had he carried a bomb at the end of his right hand. All right, he was the Bronze Bomber, and that was his whole thing. And he brought that game into this clash of the titans against Tyson Fury, the white against the black, and then what happens? Well, it looked like it was going to hold to form, and that the black man was going to dominate the white man, and so he knocks him down, I believe, in the 8th or 9th round, and everyone goes, well, there you go. Look at Tyson Fury laid out flat, and I guess that's it. And Deontay Wilder thought the same. Here he comes, raising up off the floor like, what was that, the crypt maker or whatever. Anyway, he was rose from the dead, and goes on to win a draw. Then they have a couple of other fights, and Tyson Fury wins both of those. The third one really just embarrassingly, decisively just pummeled him. And the pain that I saw in the comments from black people was palpable. It felt like not only did Deontay Wilder get knocked out, black people got knocked out when Tyson Fury won. Especially 2 out of the 3, right? So decisively with the draw. So black people weren't happy about that, okay? What is happening is, these archetypes that black people do physical things really well and white people do intellectual things really well, it's starting to kind of fall apart a little bit, because we have these examples of, wait, this white person has come in and dominated this thing that blacks are supposed to dominate. Yeah? Let's look at the NBA now. It's been again very, very obvious to me when you kind of zoom out and look at the landscape of sport that this has been coming up again and again. I will note that it's been interesting to watch ESPN. I used to watch ESPN all the time when I was younger. I had cable TV, and ESPN was a regular part of my morning activity. I have been off cable for a really long time now, and I only occasionally catch up with ESPN. I do watch a lot on YouTube, kind of highlights and things like that. But it's become apparent to me, particularly maybe since the BLM movement got so much momentum, that Disney made a very conscious effort to. The logic seemed to be we have these sports, particularly football and basketball, the things that I think get the biggest viewership. Um, we have these sports that are primarily populated by black people, black athletes, yet we have white people doing all the commentating, white people commenting on black people. Is that fair? Well, apparently not. And Disney said, well, we're going to put a lot of black people on there. We're going to have black people talking about black athletes, okay? And so it went from having probably, it just kind of flipped the ratio. I think that it used to be probably 80-20 white to black on ESPN, maybe 70-30 on average. And now it's the reverse. I think it's fairly, when I tune in, I usually see maybe one white person and, 3 or 4 black people. Many times I see on a discussion panel, all black people. And when I focus on basketball, where probably 80% of the league is black, you will have sometimes completely black, panels on ESPN discussing that sport. And again, a sphere of excellence, black people, really being able to appreciate, the genius and the brilliance of black performance in basketball in particular. And then here comes Nikola Jokic. Here come the Europeans more broadly, threatening the United States player domination. Who are these soft Euros coming in here? Particularly these soft white Euros. That's a dangerous thing to say, brother. When you're talking about Serbians, Croatians, people who have been living in war-torn countries for decades, that's not for the weak of heart. You really, really lose credibility with me when you talk softness, particularly when somebody's excellent. So here come these white players, and they're not only competing, they are ripping up the record books. Nikola Jokic, Luka Doncic, are the two primary ones that come to mind. And you can tell that there was not a lot of, there were a couple of players in particular. I think about Kendrick Perkins. Boy, how hard was it on Kendrick to give Jokic his flowers. I would say that Kendrick, in part of it is kind of Kendrick protecting the brand of black excellence in basketball. Kendrick almost single-handedly spearheaded Nikola Jokic not winning his third consecutive MVP a couple of years ago. Or was it his second? I'm getting confused. Anyway, he's won 3 out of the last 4, and the one that he didn't win, I would put at the feet of Kendrick Perkins for having said, nah, man, his numbers aren't there to substantiate this. So we're seeing this across a number of sports, and so when Jokic just keeps on setting the basketball world on fire with triple doubles, Perkins has had to come back around and eat some crow, and now will say and has said that Jokic is the best player in the world. How hard was it to form his mouth to say those words? It's painful when you've got something that you and your people take enormous pride in, to admit that maybe we're not the best in the world at everything that we thought we were. And so Jokic gets his comeuppance and gets eliminated this year with an early exit from the playoffs. And so one could say, well, we dodged a bullet. He's not going to repeat as the world champion and kind of rub our faces in, a white man being the best player in the world. Escape that bullet. Here comes Jokic. Here comes Doncic. Again, just setting the world on fire. It is incontrovertible his genius, his brilliance as a basketball player. The numbers just don't lie. In fact, I saw a grid, a graph that had most, the title was most productive postseason or most effective NBA playoffs person in the history of the game. Okay, as a combination of scoring and assists and all these other things. And there are the greats, it's a quadrant, okay? And upper right is where the highest level of performance is, the highest average, the highest, combined with the highest number of assists, combined with, highest number of rebounds, et cetera, et cetera. Some of the greatest players in the world live in these lower quadrants because it's really, really hard to, when you're in the heat of competition in the playoffs, to deliver these kinds of numbers. So you've got really great players, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Shaquille O'Neal, Michael Jordan, Tracy McGrady, just, all Hall of Fame players living in these lowest quadrants in there, and all by himself in this upper right quadrant, where no one else has ever had this combination of numbers, statistics. There's Luka Doncic, sitting by himself above, almost all of them were black. Larry Bird was in there. There were a couple of other white players, Jerry West. But he is far and away the most superior from a numerical standpoint, from a stat standpoint. He is far and away the most superior basketball player who has ever performed in the NBA playoffs. It's just the numbers, man. And that's hard to take if you're a black person that has taken so much pride. It was a similar thing in Eminem stepped into the rap game. This is our shit. Who is this white cat coming in here doing our shit? Until he establishes himself with game. It's really hard for black people who take enormous pride to see people coming in and excelling at the game that they reputationally are supposed to own. And I'm here for it. I think this is healthy. Because what it does is it disrupts this myth that all black people can excel at is sports. And it does it by showing you that white people who reputationally don't have the athleticism, don't have the ability to beat black people at the highest levels in their spheres of excellence, white people are coming in and putting their hands in the black cookie jar. How do they do that? Because that's what humans can do. We are amazing beyond measure, and you cannot limit human excellence with myth. Humans can exceed if they apply themselves and practice and have cultural support. They can succeed at any damn thing they want to. And I kind of want white people to kind of take over these sports. I kind of want to make the point that these people that we said couldn't do this thing are actually doing this thing. How is it? How is it? And I want you to take it further. One more example before I pop out. In the NBA, there are 800 players, roughly 800 players out of a country of, 360 million people. That's 0.00000, all right? One. Guess how many professional golfers there are? There are only 200 professional golfers. And who came in as considered the greatest golfer in the history of the sport? He can't get the crown now. Nicklaus still holds it, but Tiger Woods, had he not been disrupted by his issues with women and some injuries, would have probably easily been the number one man in golf, the number one player in golf. My son's cranking up some music. It must be my cue to back out. All right? I'm here for it. I'm here for white people disrupting and shattering this myth that black people are the best athletes in the world. I'm here to say that humans can be excellent at anything they want. And if white people can do this, then what can't black people exceed at? What have black people been told they couldn't excel at? They weren't smart enough to excel at. I want some black people to step up and say, with one half my brain tied behind my back, I just kicked your ass. That's what I want to see. I don't have to succeed only in sports and entertainment. I can succeed in any damn thing that I work as hard toward as I worked to be excellent in music and entertainment and sport. If I work as hard as these white people did to excel in the thing they weren't supposed to be good at, if I work as hard as they did in this thing that I'm not supposed to be good at, I could be the world's best at that. If Luka Doncic, as y'all say, slow, can't jump, doesn't have any moves, if he can beat y'all, who can't you beat? Peace.